On Thursday, May 7th, Hood River County Budget Committee members heard from Andy Belknap, a managing director at Baker Tilly. They're the consulting firm that's advising the county on budget concerns and possible ways to raise revenue.
Okay, this slide just talks about our general assumptions that go into the financial analysis that we've done. And the biggest thing I guess I want to point out here is that on the expenditure side is growing faster than the revenue side of your budget. And that is obviously that's a concern, but it's also a reality that you face because your revenue sources just aren't going as fast as the expenditure side of your budget. And we'll see what that entails for the budget in just a moment. And next slide. So the trends, as I mentioned, the trends are not encouraging, both on an actual basis and an estimated basis and a budgeted basis. The county is in a deficit when it comes to the general fund and the special revenue funds, which is where 98% of the revenues and expenditures are found. And for 25-26 and for 26-27, the deficit, expected deficits are pretty significant. I would say very significant given the revenue and expenditure side of the budget. In aggregate, around 15 million on a $50 million budget. So that's substantial. Next slide, please. Now in 23-24, which was the last kind of good fiscal year, we went back and looked at that, and it was a good year because the county got some extra timber revenue. So it can't be considered a normal year, unfortunately. Since then, as I showed you, the results have been negative. And as I'm going to show you in a moment, this is not something where there's a lot of time because the fund balances are not huge. The fund balances are really pretty minimal relative to that deficit I just showed you. So as we wrap up this presentation, we're going to be talking about what the county can do in the near term to shore up its situation, especially when it comes to revenues, because as you're probably all pretty aware, on your spending side, on your expenditure side, you're already pretty lean. Next slide. This shows the proposed budget for the coming fiscal year. And there's two things that I guess I want, or three things really that I wanted to point out. Number one, there's a substantial deficit. The difference between revenues and expenditures is you've got revenue of 37 million total and expenditures of 50 million. So that's a large gap. The general fund is already insolvent. There's no reserves there. So that's also a red flag. And finally, if you look at the bottom line, the fund balance, as I was mentioning, that fund balance is not robust compared to the, deficits always happen. Local governments run deficits from time to time. That's nothing per se to be alarmed about. They happen. But when your deficit spending threatens to erode your fund balance, that can be a problem because then your government is teetering on the verge of insolvency. And here you see that this deficit is large enough that if it happens again, you could exhaust what fund balance you have because the fund balance is projected to be, well, around it's under 30 million anyway, even if you come up somewhat better than projected. So it's not a large fund balance. And that amount of the deficit will eat into it on a pretty big basis. So we have to be concerned about this because that's only 2 to 3 years at this level of deficits. It's only 2 to 3 years. Next slide. And this is what we project based on our fiscal modeling. If things keep going this way, and this slide is titled, "This cannot happen," because it quite literally cannot happen. You don't have that much money. So we can't run a deficit of this magnitude, because long before 2035, you'll be out of money. So this literally cannot happen. You'll be out of money. And so the county would be insolvent, and there's just not that much money here. You can't run that kind of a deficit because you don't have that much in the way of fund balances. So next slide. Your general fund revenues, like every local government in Oregon, you're reliant upon property taxes. The other thing you're reliant upon is transfers and intergovernmental revenues. And that's always a little bit risky because those can be pretty volatile. Property taxes are a good source of revenue. They come in about the same. They grow a little bit every year. They're a good source of revenue, but the transfers and the intergovernment revenue can vary a lot. So that's also what I would call a yellow flag that has to be considered. Next slide. We looked at neighboring counties and to get some peer comparisons, and Hood River compares pretty well. The staffing level it's a little bit above the peer average, slightly, I guess I would say, but not a lot. It aligns well. The thing that stands out, I guess, for Hood River is in terms of your size geographically, you're very small. I think one of, if not the smallest county in the state, and I guess that can be good for service delivery in some ways, and your population is also relatively small, so you're not going to have the advantages of some of these counties that can have some pretty impressive economies of scale because they're doing things on a large scale. That's not going to accrue to your benefit. But you do have a slightly higher than average FTE count. Next slide. So I guess to summarize this, just to be able to maintain services, the county is going to need to implement some combination of new revenues and reduced expenditures ranging from 4.4 million to 5.9 million, depending on how much, to what extent you utilize your unappropriated reserve, which is a good thing that the county does. The county budgets an unappropriated reserve in its expenditure budget, so it may not have to use that. But those budget savings, if you will, are going to need to grow to 6.5 million by 2035 to stay in balance. And that's a large lift for the county, given the size of your budget. And I don't know how much expenditure reduction is available here because you're already pretty lean. We're not taking into account capital outlay. And I just don't see how you can do much capital outlay, given you are doing some in the budget now. You may have to rethink that as you determine how to make these expenditure and revenue adjustments. But it's apparent that you've got to immediately pursue new revenue sources. And you should consider expenditure reductions, and you might want to consider freezing hiring. You're recruiting for new employees at the moment, and you don't want to recruit new employees if you're going to have to turn around and start doing layoffs, which I wouldn't put that out of the picture, given what this budget picture looks like. Now let's talk about what you can do about this. Let's go to the next slide. These are some revenue options that we have suggested that the county might want to consider. The first one is a food and beverage tax. And at a 5% rate, we think this could generate approximately 2.6 million annually for the county. There are 2 cities in the state that have this. So it's not widespread, but it's not unheard of. And it would generate that 2.6 million would be a real important additional revenue for the county. There's also provision in state law for a 10-year property tax for capital. And we think you might want to pursue that to take care of some capital needs in the county. We had recommended that perhaps it be sized at 1.5 million annually, and that could be used to support infrastructure needs, facilities, and equipment needs, get that money out of being funded from the general fund. Another property tax option for 5 years could be used for operations. And we suggested that that might be considered in the range of $1 million annually to rehabilitate assets and basically get things repaired before they fail. We also think you might want to consider increasing the existing public safety operations levy, because and you cover more of those costs for the sheriff from this levy, and that could raise an additional 2.7 million annually and replace some general fund contributions that are currently being made. There's an option for a increase in the transient lodging tax, which wouldn't be a huge amount of revenue, but it's a fairly easy thing to do. People will usually support that. And then the last 2 things are things that the county could do on its own without having to call for a vote. One would be to bring on some additional resources so that you could optimize your property tax collection, bring on some additional appraisal staff so that you could get appraisals done more basically increase your appraisal activity so that you could increase your property tax revenue collection. And then finally, and I think probably the first thing you should do would be update your user fee collection strategy. You've got departments that are providing services where we can directly where we know that are directly benefiting individuals, such as community development, recreation, and environmental health, where they're doing permitting activities that are receiving funding from the from the general fund. And that doesn't need to be, those activities can be funded and should be funded, arguably, from permit fees. So we would recommend you immediately update your user fees so that people that are receiving permits from the county pay for those permits with user fees. And that can be started right away. There's no reason to wait on that. No reason to continue subsidizing permits. That's something that can start filling this budget hole right away. So with that, I think we'll close and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate you all juggling your timeline to be able to provide us that information and with so much clarity. I really appreciate it. Just the one thing to be sure we're understanding here, you had said fiscal year 2027 needing an additional 4.4 to 5.9 million positive in the budget. Would that be a year that starts in the middle of 27 and goes into 28? Is that what you mean by fiscal year 27?
That would be for the fiscal year 26, 27.
So the one we're looking at right now,
Yes,
meaning that there's 4.4 to 5.9 off in terms of the balance between revenue and the recommended balance between revenue and expenditures.
right. I'm
Thank
hoping to do better than what's laid out in the proposed budget for the coming year.
Thank you. Okay, really, I didn't know which year you were talking about for sure.
If you want to know how the rest of the discussion went, I encourage you to go to the Inform Hood River channel and look at the full county budget meeting for May 7th. It's important information and it illustrates how difficult a situation the county budget committee members, as well as the rest of us, are facing. Thanks.